So, for example, in your article, I think you mentioned that the left has basically abandoned any sort of commitment to a redistributive policy. But then you have Obamacare, which by some measures is the most redistributive governmental policy that has happened in decades. Does that...
In some ways, it may be the most downwardly redistributive policy that's happened in decades, although that's kind of setting the bar kind of low, right? I mean, if you set the high jump bar, low enough, a pygmy could you win the meet, right? But actually, the jury is not out on Obamacare, right? I just saw an article in the New York Times yesterday. I think it is in New York State. You know, a number of states have gotten waivers that enable them. I think they even get more money for doing this, outsourcing Medicaid. And already, this article indicated that insurers are doing what insurers do, right? They've already begun rapidly searching through the databases, to cherry pick, people who are least likely to get sick, right? And I suspect that you've followed, something of the contretemps around, the Cadillac tax and the dangers that poses for the trade union movement. There are also other facets of this thing that are that haven't been resolved yet, but are uncertain. For example, the incentive that it may offer employers to stop providing health care, or to stop hiring, or to shift from full-time to part-time employment. In fact, on the way to the airport this morning, I heard an ad on the sports talk show network, and where else, but for a company that proposes to specialize in helping employers figure out how to game Obamacare, right? So it kind of occurred to me. So it's created these other markets, right? And cottage industries. And after all, for me, the two most important things to say about Obamacare are, one, it was a product of the Heritage Foundation. Okay, so that should send out some kind of danger Will Robinson signs, right? And two, Obama himself made it very clear from the outset that he would not entertain anything that the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry didn't accept. That's what my father used to call the equivalent of hiring Jesse James as a bank guard, right? Because these are the entities that created the problem, right? And if you say no, so then once again, we get ourselves into this position where because and granted, a lot of the opposition to Obama is lunatic and proto-fascist psychopath. Actually, the term of art for me of late has been kayfabe. Is that how you pronounce it? It's like the wrestling term. I just learned this a few months ago, right? It's it addresses the phenomenon in wrestling where everybody knows it is fake, right? But it's not just a willingness to suspend disbelief, but it's a commitment to incorporating oneself into the soap operatic quality of the sham, right? Because it's so appealing emotionally, and that's kind of what this this Tea Party right wing stuff just seems like to me, right? They go on elaborate pageantry about how much they love the veterans and cut their benefits, right? Because because there's no connection between word and deed. And the last vestige of my Catholicism, once I could finally shed the Notre Dame football thing, is that word and deed. I just cannot accept that word is the same as deed, right? But we wind up. Because they're so horrible and dangerous seeming, we wind up being vulnerable to that. Well, you got to shut up and get behind him because look at these evil people who are coming after him. which is the larger pattern of how the left has been captured and corralled within the Democratic Party. And that's happened because of the shifts in the political culture since the late 70s, early 80s, depending on how it is you want to count, where, there's like a capitalist counteroffensive that just won, basically.
Well, you know what I wonder about elements like the Tea Party and the ultra-right?
Mm-hmm.
What they do so effectively is they give people a sense of, even if it's an illusion, of power.
Right.
And people are hungry for some sense
Right.
that they can have some control over
Right.
their lives.
Right.
And that seems to be something that the left has not done very well since we had a thriving labor
Right.
union,
Well,
or labor movement.
yeah, I think that's right. And I think part of the problem, and I mean, there are a lot of sources of it, right? But, one problem that, and I guess I have I'll offer a bit of a generational mea culpa about this, is something happened in and around the new left, when for much of the left outside the labor movement, at least, the idea of pursuing political power just seemed to become distasteful, right? It's that, and concerns about centralized political organizations and the gulag and all that dumb stuff have kind of put people in a position where we are. Well, it's odd, actually, because on the one hand, that there's a deep suspicion of central political authority and government in practice, right? Like, anti-government, anti-statist reflexes that run through a lot of the left. But on the other hand, there's this willingness to subordinate oneself to the Democratic Party. But I think fundamentally, right? All right. So, I mean, what the Tea Party offers people, and I mean, it is a different class, right? I mean, this is like, right. I mean, this isn't the working classes in the Tea Party, but what the Tea Party offers is a vision of a society that's been restored to ideals of justice, right? Now, they're dangerous ideals of justice, right? The left, to the extent that the left has, or that the political imagination, within what we think of as a left, has shriveled, then there's no comparable thing that we can offer, right? I mean, what we offer is a pageantry of protest, is bearing witness against evil, is expose of evils and corruption and bad things, and exaggerating the significance of little incremental fights, right? I mean, I've described this as the myth of the spark, and I understand the basis for this too, right? I mean, we're so badly defeated, right? So badly corralled that it's only natural to look for signs of dawn coming. But that's how we get this proclamation, right? Occupy, Obama, and they're basically the same thing. Fast food organizing, state level fights to increase the minimum wage. I mean, these are all, well, those are good and important things. The problem is the rhetoric that they come packaged in, right? Which is typically, a sense that, okay, so the people are moving now, and more and more this is going to happen, and we'll keep reporting on it, and the masses will rise. That's just not the way politics gets done. That's not the way the movements get built. It's it's funny. It's like a combination of a technical fix, right? There's this thing you can do, this candidate you can run, right? This gimmick, like people who pay too much attention to what's his name, George Lakoff, right? I mean, there's a rhetorical guide, right? You don't use this word, you use that word. No, I mean, that doesn't happen. But it feels like, a combination of the technical fix and mysticism, right? I mean, the fantasy, right, that this spark can happen. And, I mean, well, but I guess the Frankfurt School argued that in the early days that, those two kind of come together anyway, because each one, depends on the other. But anyway, so we don't have that to offer people. And what I've seen often enough, too, is that, we've developed our own culture as a self-identified left or self-described left or community of progressives or whatever. That's basically kind of inward-looking one, right? With foci on stuff like policing language, but also, more importantly, a demand that people demonstrate their political bona fides and sensitivity as part of being part of our club, both reflects and reinforces a condition of not being inclined to talk to people that you don't already agree with. When we were doing the Labor Party thing, and I was in Chicago, one of our first campaigns was to do door-to-door work around this idea of a constitutional amendment that would guarantee a living wage. And some of the activists in our chapter, in the Chicago chapter, didn't want to go out and knock on doors. They wanted to set up, lit tables at the supermarket because, that way they'd be less likely to have to talk to people who didn't agree with them already. So when we beat that back, then they wanted to go, to pick out a couple of precincts in a ward that was predominantly black and had a high concentration of union members, because that also would have been comparatively safe. So what we did was, like we got a ward on the southwest side where the precinct list looked like an eye chart, right? Because it was mainly East European and Polish. And it's a ward that voted Democratic in the local elections, and as likely as not went Republican in the national elections. But it's a working class ward, because our view is that that's who we need to figure out how to win, right? And we need to figure out how to win them, right? Before the fascist organizers from the Tea Party and the militia movement get there, because once. Right, because what the right offers is basically an ontology, and it's frightening because of conspiracy theory and stuff, and the horrible sexism and racism and stuff, but it's internally consistent, and once somebody buys into that, it's really not worth the time to try to talk them out of it, as individuals anyway.
Well, so I feel like there is this. Culturally, we have this problem where we've been conditioned to be sort of passive, and there seems to be this intellectual stasis which has been settled upon us, so that we go to and surround ourselves with people who we know agree with us.
Right.
We don't reach out to the people. I think the Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement, at least as when the Tea Party movement first arose, quote unquote.
Right.
I think that in some ways they were identifying similar problems in society.
Yeah, some of them probably were.
They disagreed on solutions pretty dramatically.
Right.
But I felt like there was some overlap there, and
Rick Santelli and Dick Armey and the other founders of the Tea Party knew where they were going.
Right. So they were pulling these strings, but they were playing on this dissatisfaction of the underclasses or working classes.
Right.
And that's the same anger that gave rise to Occupy. I think it was directed in a more accurate direction.
Right.
Towards Wall Street and bankers and the wealthy.
Yep.
But that's almost after the point. I wonder if it doesn't make more sense to focus on those legitimate grievances that working people are experiencing and find common ground on that and forge connections and then unify and start talking about solutions.
Yeah, well, no, I agree. Look, you can go out into western Pennsylvania and Maine and Maine and New Hampshire are no different, right? And find what working people suffering and frightened and and they're not necessarily primed to go right wing, even if they kill animals, right? So yeah, I mean, it is possible, right? And see, that's another reason I think the trade union movement is so important, right? Because that's where working people like are organized, right? I want to say this thing about point to another thing, or an aspect of this problem with the left that you identify. Take the mass demonstration, right? The mass demonstration has not been effective as a political tool since my early 20s, probably, and I'm 67. But we keep doing it, and we keep doing it in the same ways with the same expectations. Every now and then when I'm in D.C. and there's one going on, I might go to it with friends. As a rule, I'm more likely to give the speeches in the shower in the morning because they're always the same. As I look out across this sea of faces, young, old, black, white, gay, straight, want to send a message, this, that, and the other. And I mean, the mass demonstration assumes, right, that what you're doing is demonstrating social power and a base, right? But what's much nearer the mark is that, and when you talk to people, I mean, they'll tell you this ultimately, that we can't have any effect, we can't shut anything down. It's true the corporate media won't project our message and our issues honestly. They won't even report the numbers honestly. But the demo is good because it brings us together and helps us to see that we're not alone. Well, okay, well that's fine. I mean that's helpful, but there's a clouded objective there, right? So it's not forcing the government to do something. It's looking inward, right, to keep us happy or whatever, right? And I think the way that we do those things has accommodated, to that fact, right? I mean, that's how we evolved this culture of playfulness within the demo, right, to keep us entertained because we know we're not stopping anything, right? So, and I don't mean to dump on that, right? Or I mean dump on the commitment that lies behind it. But the question is, why do we keep doing the same things without having any effect, and never kind of stopping to assess? And I think part of it is Marx has this great passage in the introduction to the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, which I won't be able to reproduce, but the thrust of it is that just when activists are kind of on the edge of a new political moment, I mean the inclination is to reach back into history and to cover themselves with familiar costumes and slogans. I mean, I saw, like when I was in Seattle at the WTO stuff, like a lot of the young people, you could almost even see the videotape of the Days of Rage or the 1968 Democratic Convention kind of playing in their eyes. You know what I mean? Even to the point of chanting, "The whole world is watching," basically. So I mean that's part of it, right? And it's we do it because we do it, and but the demo becomes iconic as a way of expressing concentrated political concern. But then that's when the critique of the realities of the corporate media just kind of gets suspended, right? I mean, you can't expect them to do what FAIR exposes every month that they don't do, because they are the corporate media. I mean, that's not a nickname, right? I mean, that's who they are. And I mean, and of course, it extends as much to MSNBC as it does to Fox and the rest of them.
Yeah, well, one of the central conceits of the demonstration, and the protests that come up is that it's almost like it's buying into this notion that has been bred into us that we are a democratic society. And if we demonstrate this democratic upswell of power, then obviously the forces have to listen, but they never do. And there was that recent study that came out of Princeton that indicated that we are, in fact, not a democratic society. We're an oligarchic society. And so, just for example, to jump back to Obamacare, there's this tendency on the left to defend it. When in actuality, it was initiated out of an act of supreme political cowardice. I mean, the majority of people wanted a single-payer or not-for-profit option, and Obama dismissed it out of hand.
That's a very important point. I mean, even the public option, for God's sake, which is like the little sister. But yeah, no, I mean, that's a very important point. So then we get invested in shilling for what the Democrats do, to our own potential base, which is the worst position you could possibly be in. No, I think you're absolutely right about that, and maybe, I mean, it's going to take a while, but maybe as this thing plays out, it'll be possible. To rekindle the single-payer movement. I mean, my close comrade and good friend Mark Dudzik, who was the last national organizer of the Labor Party, is actually now the coordinator of the labor campaign for single-payer, and they've been building, again, inside the labor movement, right? Because trade unions in particular can see what's coming down the road, and it doesn't take a lot of in fact, it doesn't take any dystopian, imagination to see that one likely way that this thing is going to play out is that the federal government will be responsible for herding everybody in the country into private insurers, risk pools. So, they're creating a market, for the private insurance industry. And
without cost controls, really.
Right. No, that's right. That's exactly right. Which brings up another point I often like to make, and it seems like it's close enough to pertinent here to make it. But that, going back to Clinton, right? Clinton's two main social policy reforms, apart, of course, from imposing the sentencing disparity for crack and powder cocaine, but were so-called welfare reform, which ended the federal government's 60-year commitment to provide direct income support for the indigent, and his attack on, or the Hope 6 program, which basically has put an end to the federal commitment to provide directly housing, affordable housing for low-income people. But in each case, and see, this is what makes it not just punitive, but punitive in a particularly neoliberal way. With the case of welfare reform, what Clinton actually did was switch the beneficiaries of the subsidies, right, from poor people from poor people themselves to employers of low wage labor, right, who got the subsidies for hiring people on workfare who technically often enough weren't covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act, and with Hope 6, what he did was shift the subsidy from direct provision of housing for poor people to landlords, right? The Section 8 program, and that's what Obama, that's what the Obama administration is doing to public education now. But we can say, I think that one of the bright spots, right, is the Chicago Teachers Union. Not just that they won the strike, but how they organized, both among school employees and parents and in the broader community, not just to support the teachers, but around the issue of education as a public good. And they're continuing this organization, and they're trying like hell to build a movement that will unelect Emmanuel. And there are other nodes like that around the country too that are coming out of the teachers unions. The American Postal Workers Union has elected a new slate now another old Labor Party guy, Mark Demonstein, is president, who have exactly the same approach to preserving the postal system. The American Transit Workers Union have done the same thing, and so that's where. So I mean, these are hopeful signs, I think.
Yeah, I think what the conservatives do with education is just so cynical. I mean, they defund it,
right,
and hamstring public
right.
educational systems, and then they say, well, these outcomes are terrible. You don't want to send your kid here.
Right, exactly.
We should be taking money and sending it to private schools. And it,
Yep.
it seems so nakedly obvious to me that it's about privatizing, making money. It's capitalism, right? Making money anywhere you possibly can.
Right.
And the idea that there'd be such a massive public institution serving a public good, not making money for capitalists,
right,
is...
Well, yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And it's kind of like, I mean, it's like it's like Thatcher 101, right? Because that's what she did with national health in the UK. But and it's also, I mean, and it's punitive at the same time, right? And I mean, there's a way, I guess you could say, this is another thing that neoliberalism means. It means, what's neo about neoliberalism is that it depends on having this cache of public institutions that can be treated like the primeval forest was, like in Adam Smith, right? It's there for them to be monetized, right? So it's like pure profit.
Well, I'm afraid we're rapidly running out of time, but I would be remiss if I didn't end by asking you, what are some tangible first steps that working people can take to begin to reclaim some sense of power, democratic power in this country, and revitalize the left? What can we do? Small question to end on.
Yeah, really. Well, look, I think the first step, right, has to be to recognize that we are defeated, right? And I mean, I know it sounds demoralizing. I think it's more likely to be demoralizing not to face up to the fact and to pretend that there's a fire going on the beach and like the unicorns are going to come on the ship. And I think in some ways it's emancipating, right, to acknowledge that we don't have a base, because then what that means is that we need to spend a little less time following the horse race aspects of electoral politics. So the fact of the matter is, as a left, we can't have any impact on that anyway, except to do what we can to support the least worst of the options, and to put the placards down for a little while and think about ways to talk to people you work with or your family members or others, and I mean, listen as much as you talk. And just figure out how to do what you suggested a little while ago. I mean, try to connect with other people. And I mean, obviously, I'm talking about people who understand themselves to be activists. And to just just start trying to think about how to engage with people and through institutions to fight for, to begin to find ways to fight for affirmative visions, right? With the understanding that we didn't get into this position overnight, we're not going to get out of it overnight, and I think it does, right, kind of ease the pressure, right? I mean, because look, I mean, we all spend probably a lot more time than we should. I do spend a lot more time than I should, following a strike in Bolivia or whatever. The fact of the matter is, you can't do anything about the strike in Bolivia. I told a friend of mine years ago, and I think this, didn't go down quite the right way, but that for too many people, and especially those who hang around colleges and stuff, being on the left has come to mean being really, really well informed about what's going on everywhere in the world. But the task is to figure out how to try to broaden the base and maybe keep trying to push the boulder like an inch or two, right? Because the fact of the matter is, I mean, well, of course we lose, right? I mean, that's that's who we are. It's not a defect. I tell students who want to do this kind of stuff, that at a minimum you need to think like a baseball player, right? Where if you're successful 3 times out of 10, you go to the Hall of Fame, right? Because the other side has much greater material resources and ideological resources. They control the mass culture industry and set everybody's common sense. So, it's daunting. It's a long-term project, right? It's like, Mao's parable of the foolish old man who thought he could move mountains, right? You just have to start digging and keep digging and keep digging. And, sometimes something breaks open and you get lucky, but, that's the only way to do it.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Reed, for being here. Very much appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.